Welcome to Leaders Path, leadership journeys of people within the IT and business change professions. Brought to you by Middleton's Assured Talent, IT leadership and business change recruitment specialists.
Welcome everyone to the fourth episode of Leaders Path, where we look to dissect the careers of IT and business change leaders. Hopefully to share some pearls of wisdom. Today we're speaking to Alison Kelly. Alison is the head of change at UKAR, and I know the last few episodes we've had slightly more IT focused people, so I think it'd be good to have someone very much with lots of experience in the change world to chat to today. So Alison, over to you. So the first question I always like to ask is just, ultimately, when you meet someone in a work sense or in social sense, how would you best describe what you do?
So I usually use the easy option, which is to call myself a project manager.
Right.
And I think people understand what a project manager does, although lots of different industries have project managers who do different things.
Yeah.
So they may, I don't know, they may assume I'm in the construction industry or I manage, big material projects like that. But it seems to satisfy people.
Yeah, straightforward.
that they get it.
Because it's funny, business change is a title. I always find when I mention to people that don't know, particularly don't know the finance world perhaps, and I say, I'm a recruiter of IT and business change, they don't quite get that business change term. A lot of people that are in larger corporate organisations do, but as I say, a lot of people I speak to, they say, what's business change? And similarly, I quite often quickly jump to, it's project and programme management, it's changing businesses, transformation, that type of thing. But no, thank you for that. And I suppose as brief as you'd like, can you give us a picture of your career path, where you started and the journey along the way?
So I started as somebody who didn't do very well in their A-levels, and so I didn't go on to higher education, but looked for a role which, I don't know, I suppose I was literate and numerate.
Right.
And now I went into admin, and I worked initially for Midland Bank, as it was very many years ago, now HSBC. In a branch, serving on the till and in the back office, balancing the books. I went on to a role with BACS, the direct debit people. Again, largely administrative, but I picked up an opportunity there to become an auditor.
Right.
So I have a dark past as a systems auditor, computer auditor, as I was at the time. Back in the day. And from there, because I was living and working in the southeast in London, decided to make a move to Yorkshire, which led me to a job in Bradford and Bingley,
right.
In the internal audit function. So the interesting thing about Bradford and Bingley in those days, in what was definitely the olden days for building societies, is that I worked in almost every function within the organisation within my 11 years in that business. Yeah. So I had the opportunity to move from audit into quality assurance in IT, which led me to become a business architect with some project management, project planning experience. From working in IT, I moved into the business area that I'd built a system for. I was launching laptops to financial advisors back in the 90s when laptops were something new. And I don't think I ever worked in a branch, but I'd worked in branch banking before anyway. But so that was in sales support, if you like, in the technology and change side of the sales function. I ended up moving as the organisation changed from the olden days into a period of having a new chief executive, and ultimately it became a PLC, transitioned from building society to PLC. So late 1990s, I started working in a process role within operations, and I was asked to go head up the postal and telephone direct savings unit within Bradford and Bingley, and to re-engineer it. So we drove out a lot of cost, introduced a lot of automation, and I managed the unit at the same time as being responsible for fundamentally changing it. And I think that's probably where I got the major change bug.
Right.
The desire to get up every morning and make a difference, do something different tomorrow than we did yesterday.
Yeah.
And so I managed that direct savings unit, managed a transformation program within it, and then came back to head office and worked in the HR function, which also needed transformation at the time, and it ended up heading up reward and HR transformation. So, as I say, that's pretty much every function. And after 11 years and on the cusp of a transition into PLC, I managed to transform my way out of a role, really. We transformed the HR function, and it was timely for me from a personal perspective to take a package and leave the organisation. So then, after a couple of years of being a mum, I did some consulting with a partner who'd previously worked at Brad and Bing as well. I did quite a lot of HR strategy, comms strategy. What else did we do? Lots of facilitation work, and some systems implementations, some transformations for various businesses, which was fun for a time, but I found that the selling the business was less fun for me than actually delivering the business. Yeah. And I spent a number of years thereafter being a jobbing project management contractor, if you like, project and program management. Yeah. I worked at Empower as a program manager. I worked at Eon as a program manager at Skipton Building Society, and then ended up at UKAR, which is, of course, the combination of Bradford and Bingley and Northern Rock.
You bump into people in the halls that were from your first time?
They were just very much like me, a little thicker in the waist and greyer in the hair than the last time I had seen them. I think it was 10 years later. I came back to the same head office and some of the same people, who had been through nationalisation and the credit crunch, and I had spent all of the credit crunch outside of financial services in utilities. So by happy accident, really, I had avoided the hard times in financial services. So I worked here as a contractor for a couple of years, and then had the opportunity to apply for a head of change role. So we didn't have a change function here, really. I think we had 7 people. We had transitioned away from a long-term arrangement with IBM into a new IT service provision with HCL, and I'd managed a large chunk of the transformation integration project, which brought Bradford and Bingley and Northern Rock together. Then I managed the closure of one of the Northern Rock offices, or the transition of all our people. I think we had 700 or 800 people still in a Newcastle-based office, which had transitioned to Virgin Money. So we had to get all our people out of there. We rationalised a number of functions and created the Crossflat site as our head office. And that was my next big programme of work. And then Head of Change came along. And so I built a new permanent team. We'd had all our change based on a huge contractor base of 200 plus people and only 7 permanent change people. A handful of BAs and PMs. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So that's just over 2 years ago now. And we're now 30 permanent people because of the massive change that we're doing now. So we are transitioning the 90% of this business back into the private sector. We've just announced an acquisition by Computershare. of our operating company. That, as I say, that will be about 90% of colleagues, with the remainder retaining responsibility for managing the government-owned assets.
Right.
We've also sold into the marketplace 13.5 billion of those assets back into private ownership. So it's been a massive build of a function alongside of a corporate transformation, which has taken in the build 2.5 years to date. It will take about another 6 months to finally land.
Yeah. And because I guess it's been an interesting time in there, and particularly for you to build a team and attract people to an organisation that, I guess, for a period that what the future was not clear, and perhaps, or perhaps it was even clear that it wouldn't exist in X amount of years.
We've been behaving like a business in wind down.
Yeah.
So we've made some quite tactical decisions. We've been a little bit torn between investing in the business, and we've always been committed to investing in the people. But 5 years of UKAR, and as you reference, a need to attract good people and keep the lights on and do a really good job, has resulted in us having what I believe to be a really good reputation with our owning. So we are owned by HM Treasury. They've put the Help to Buy schemes through us. We've built them, we've implemented them, we now administer them. That when I say schemes, I mean the mortgage guarantee scheme and the ISA, the newly launched ISA. So we have a really good track record of implementing technology and business change, to the point where HM Treasury didn't bother tendering for that. They just said, we've got a business who can do that, so we'll launch a new product and they can do it for us. And we've also built sufficient value for Computershare to be prepared to acquire and go through a competitive process. We've practically selected our new partner through a competitive process, and they're acquiring a viable and vibrant business, which is really, and what is called Project Phoenix. Not surprisingly, it's a little bit cliche, isn't it? But from the ashes of the credit crunch, we're now actually a success story that's being returned to the private sector, and we no longer have to tell a good story about why you'd come to work for UKAR, because we have a future and there's a growth plan all of a sudden. So that's very good news for us.
It's exciting. And you obviously talked there about the time you spent in utilities out of financial services. What similarities, differences did you experience, from utilities to the financial services sector?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we spend a lot of money, we make a lot of money in financial services. It's a vibrant sector. But practically in utility, well, certainly gas and electricity, I had a very brief spell at Yorkshire Water as well, which was a different experience. But certainly in gas and electric, they talk in telephone numbers when they talk investment in infrastructure and building, like I said. I mean, I wasn't even in the generation side, which is another step up again. But working in retail with a company like npower with circa 7 million customers, and I was responsible for managing a metering programme. So the kind of investment that they make in the hardware associated with what they have to do, alongside the technology and the resource investment that they're prepared to make is considerable, is quite staggering really. And then I moved on to heading up the smart metering programme, which is, so that was, goodness me, how long since I left npower? 5 or 6 years, probably 6 years, and that programme has still to properly launch because it's government-led and it's got to be incentivised. Privatised businesses won't go and make infrastructural investment without clear return for themselves, and therefore it's got to be incentivised. And and clearly climate change implications and encouragement from government to invest in what could actually result in some emissions reductions through smart metering takes years. It's almost like the timescales and the numbers are just so much bigger. And I found it to be slow.
Really?
And I found the strategy to be never present. So we tinker around the edges, but never like step back and look at the big picture and get started. So I was program manager for smart metering, which was assessed at that time simply for npower to be a £1 billion project. Expected to take place over 10 years, and here I am 6 years later and they still haven't really launched it. So I found that hugely frustrating. And one of the things that attracted me to UKAR was that we've done lots of big change by necessity, because it's a business that's had to fundamentally change a lot in its short life, in its 5 years of existence. But we've just cracked on and done it.
Yeah.
And where we haven't been able to sit back and ponder the strategy for months and years at a time, we've had to just get on and do change, to rationalise our cost base, to integrate our processes, to engage our people, to manage our customer accounts in as you say, in a business that had really no future. The level of engagement and focus was stark by contrast. And it was almost like I contrast this business to others which do have a future. Sometimes businesses seem to perceive that they've got all the time in the world and there's no urgency. Whereas when you inject a little urgency in the shape of, well, we've got to get on and do this because it's our purpose. It's fundamentally what we're about. And if we don't get on and do it, we won't exist. Then it changes the shape of everything, really. We're very focused.
Yeah, sounds it. Interesting. So looking back over that career then today, what is there any one particular move you made that you think was the best one or stands out to you in terms of, you know, where you are now or how you feel about your career?
I think I think many people will say that they've been lucky enough to work with one or two individuals who've made a difference. In the same way that some people remember certain teachers who've inspired and engaged them. So when I had probably about halfway through my Bradford and Bingley career, and the old guard was swept aside and a new chief executive arrived, he brought with him an operations director who was just different to anybody else that we'd experienced before. He engaged with people. He spoke to literally he ran workshops so that he could speak to every single people within operations, which was probably about 3,000 people at the time. And he was committed to being everywhere, talking to everybody, listening to everybody. And he asked me to, his style was so interpersonal and approachable compared to the very hierarchical structure that we'd been used to, a feudal, if you like, management style in building society. He asked me to manage the savings unit, which had a contact centre in it. It had a back office. It had a front office kind of workflow process, and they knew just by looking at it that people were demotivated, were a little bit downtrodden, and that there were enormous efficiency opportunities there. And so it was a little bit of an experiment for him, I think. Give this girl something self-contained, ask her not only to be the leader and manager of it, but also to take a re-engineering team there with her and change it while she leads it. So for him, it was a little bit of a perfect storm, because the true benefit of delivering change in a self-contained environment, clearly we need IT changes, we needed HR changes, we needed cross-functional involvement to make that happen. But it was a little self-contained unit where I could have complete autonomy, pretty much, subject to his support. And that truly changed how I felt about my ability to lead people, about my instinct, if you like, for change, and what were the right choices to make, what were the right priorities to pursue. Some of the things that come from just years of experience seem to kind of start to gel for me there. And I wasn't very old. I was only in my early 30s, early mid 30s. And so it was a fantastic opportunity from somebody who trusted enough to leave me alone to do it, but at the same time was there to support. So it involved me moving my family from Yorkshire to the Midlands for a year or so. I had a young son at the time. And I had no idea why John thought that was a good thing for me to do, because I wouldn't have picked myself for it. But I suppose the trust went both ways. I trusted him to not give me something I wasn't capable of. So it only involved, I suppose, how many people worked in DSU? About 70 people, and lots and lots of part-timers who worked maybe just a Saturday or just a Saturday and a Sunday morning. So it meant it was just a small enough community to get your arms around, but big enough to feel like you were really making a difference.
Yeah, no, that's great. You obviously mentioned that he recognised the talent. Well, he obviously recognised the talent in you. How do you identify talented people? What is it for you jumps out about someone that kind of, says that person's got future talent, or there's something different or exceptional about them?
That's really hard. I think like many things for me anyway, it's very instinctive, but I think somebody who can articulate and feel passionate about their subject. So somebody who's prepared to discuss and discourse on a subject that they believe in. And you can see that almost immediately. You start to chat to somebody. I have to say, maybe wrongly, I don't have a structured approach to seeking out talent. No. It kind of walks across your path and you see it and you appreciate it and you grab hold of it. We've got lots of people within my function who have served many, many years. We've got people who've done 27, 28, 30 years in the organisation. I say lots, a handful. And we've got the other end of the spectrum as well. We've recruited somebody who came to UKAR as an apprentice and worked for a year in IT and has now come into our portfolio office. So those are the two ends of the spectrum, if you like. And we've also offered people opportunities to train as project managers. So we've had a little trainee scheme. We've called people project officers, and they've come, between people in their 40s and people in their, I think, probably early 30s. So people who've been team leading or doing administrative roles elsewhere in the organisation. So there's no kind of, I think when you say spot talent, people tend to think of young thrusting graduates and talent comes from all sorts of areas. I also think about a lady who's worked with me. She's a contract project officer. And if she thought that I was putting her name and talent in the same sentence, she'd be laughing her socks off, I think. But her differentiator is her focus, her work rate, her commitment, her diligence, and she's not always perfect, but she's always the person you'd choose to have by your side on a tough project, because she'd always be right there with you, spotting the mistakes and digging you out of holes. So, talent's a many and varied thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really. And I just think people display it through their passion and their sparkle.
And actually, in some ways, I think I kind of debate with myself a little bit that there's this idea that some people are talented and some people are not. I think probably the reality is everyone is talented, but it's what talent and where does it fit into the world? And, I guess that creates a complexity of, how do you genuinely align people's natural attributes to careers? Because career planning by individuals doesn't quite work like that, does it? You may tend towards something that suits you and you do well in it, so you progress in it, but people easily get stuck in a track that's not right for them as well,
Well,
so
that's very true, and some people are doing things they're not enjoying, and they're in places they don't want to be. I mean, going back to my boss John, he used to talk about how you could find people working in an operational setting, let's say, who might not seem to sparkle and might be, Joe Plod, but you'd talk to them and you'd find that they were the secretary of the local angling club, or they were coaching, a kids' football team, and every Saturday that's where you'd see their passion coming out in a completely different setting. And to remember, as you've just said, that people don't always get turned on by the same things, do they? And they're not always turned on by what causes them to earn a living either. So it's not always in the workplace that you see it, is it?
No. And, the benefits in those few organisations out there that genuinely have a strength-based recruitment or organisational planning or design system, the level of engagement they gain in those companies, the output they gain because of it, but it's very hard to do. I think for most organisations to have that approach is difficult. So what advice would you give your younger self, perhaps when you're in your 20s going into your 30s? Is there any you look back now and think of, if I only knew that?
I think I would definitely advise myself to have the courage of my convictions and doubt myself less.
Right.
Try to believe in my own capabilities, and I still struggle with self-confidence and seeing myself as others see me. So I worry about things like being unreasonable, and I always try and find a good way out of tricky situations, which I think has the upside of making me a reasonable facilitator and mediator, but sometimes causes me to not just stamp my foot and stand my ground when maybe that's something I should do as well. So getting the balance right between being self-confident and demanding of others. Always demanding of myself, not so much of others. So I would suggest to myself that actually I'm capable of far more than I give myself credit for a lot of the time. I think I'd say stop worrying and don't work as hard.
Really?
Yeah, definitely.
It's the self-doubt and the hard time we give ourselves, or certainly, a lot of people do. I certainly do. But there's almost a balance in that as well, because some of that actually is what drives you to be very good at what you do. So you almost need a bit of it, or it can be useful at times. But I was listening to something the other day, and I think I don't know if it was a famous quote, but this person certainly referenced that we should we should treat ourselves like we would treat our best friends. Where actually we treat ourselves more often like our enemies in terms of the internal dialogue we have. We should just be a bit more compassionate with ourselves, which is good advice. Not easy to always follow, I guess, but Excellent. Couple of final questions then. What technology resource, or even just general work productivity tool type thing? I think I'm expecting someone to tell me their handwritten diary as a response to this. But what technology tools currently has the biggest positive impact on your working life? Would you say?
I'm a dinosaur. I think I really am. I'm only really a standard user of the MS Office suite. I think emails are great. I know people complain about emails, but they may not come from a generation in which we used to handwrite everything and get a typist to actually put it onto paper. When I was an auditor, I literally did handwrite my reports and give them to a secretary who used to use Carbon and Tipex at the time. So that's how old I am. I came to my first job at Bradford and Bingley without a desktop. We didn't even have desktops in those days. So it's all amazing to me. It's fabulous. And I think being able to email, being able to have electronic diaries, and being able to check on my iPad whether I've got any emails when I'm at home, or even when I get up in the morning if I'm if I'm working early or late. So I think I do have a file of facts sitting on the table next to me. I still have a paper diary.
Yeah.
But that is because I like to know what's come. I tend to like a forward view. So electronic diaries tend to be a day at a time.
Yeah.
And it's harder to get a perspective. So I like to have a forward view. Otherwise, I don't write very much down.
Do you know?
I have friends and colleagues who write everything. And one friend in particular who uses, is it Microsoft OneNote?
Yeah.
Who diagrams all of meetings and writes down everything, and keeps files on everything. I very rarely write in a meeting unless it's an action. It's less I've got to do something. So I'm a dinosaur, and I love my iPhone, and I couldn't work without the usual office tools, but that's it really.
No. And the final one, I don't know if you are a reader of kind of books relating to management, leadership, or of that sort of ilk. But is there any particular books that you do recommend, particularly to people that are maybe aspiring to be in the kind of role that you've got or had, in the past?
Absolutely not a business book. But I did think, because I saw the questions that you suggested you might ask, and I did give this a little bit of thought. Because I read Richard Branson's Business Made Bare, I think, and I think he's amazing, and I think that's great for him as an individual. Not all of us have those opportunities, those insights, or those capabilities. And I think generally there's a risk that business books make us all feel a little bit inadequate. And require us to be amazing and top of the tree and Donald Trump, and God forbid. But what made a real difference to me, so I've been fortunate enough to have a little bit of coaching over the last year or so. And for me, who as quite a reflective individual, I found that really helpful to have time out, opportunity in a busy life to reflect on my interactions with other people and how I felt about situations, and the point that you make about balancing a desire to get things done and be not successful, but be good and be diligent, but letting the anxiety go from that. One book that I read whilst I was going through that process was called The Power of Vulnerability. By a lady called Brené Brown.
Yeah, I've heard her on a couple of podcasts. I've not read the book.
She's done a few TED Talks, and I didn't actually read it. I listened to books quite a lot, is my preference, and I found her to be quite inspiring. And that is because I believe very strongly that the more you become yourself and believe in yourself, and the less you carry your ego and the person that you think everybody wants you to be, the more powerful you can become. And I'm also now listening to a book called Presence, and I've only just started it, so I can't recommend it, but Amy, I can't remember her name, but she, I think, is a social psychologist, but she talks about how people can see through. People talk about presence as being authenticity and being true to yourself and not pretending because people see it very quickly and easily and mistrust it. So those are the kinds of insights and sources of advice that I would suggest to people. If you want to succeed in business, be you. Yeah. Don't try and be Richard Branson. Very few of us can be or would want to be.
No, and as you say, it just sets you up for the feeling of inadequacy. I can't say the word, but without a doubt, some of these things. I listen to quite a few podcasts, and you do get a certain type of very successful person that I think are very confident, and that's fine. But you just feel, I don't know. As I say, I think you can end up feeling inadequate when you listen to them because they're telling you how they're getting out of bed at 4:30 every morning, and they're they're doing everything perfectly, and you're like, that's just not reality. But
and most of us are worn out just by the idea of that, aren't we?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Excellent. Well, Alison, thank you very much. That's been absolutely brilliant. I'm going to stop record, so if you stay on the line, but I'll just say thank you and press stop now.